Unmute always helps. I thought I'd press the button. Good morning, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever in the country this finds you. So in fact, if you're online, if you're seeing this on Facebook or X, LinkedIn, YouTube, flick us a message for where you are. Let me know. I'm here in Auckland, and just to start the morning with a bit of controversy, it's 6 degrees and I'm freezing. And why that's controversial is because all of you who are anywhere south of Auckland will be saying, what a wimp, toughen up. Particularly my friends in Canterbury who will say 6 degrees, that's luxury. So good morning, welcome to Solid Ground. As the name suggests, it's about founding, if you will, or creating a foundation of good values, good ethics, good faith, to discuss the issues of the day. Those who have followed this, I think we're up to our 13th episode now. People who follow this know it's an eclectic range of topics which have caught my eye, but basically it focuses on issues that relate to families, to our communities, things political, both here in New Zealand and overseas. Importantly, I love your feedback. If you want to comment during the show, jump particularly onto the Family First Facebook page. Now, why I say that? Because it's going across multiple platforms. As I say, some of you will be watching this on LinkedIn, some will be on my Facebook page. But if you want to comment, and you want those comments to come direct to me, then jump onto the Family First Facebook page, and those come through just like this, as I can press magic buttons here. So good morning to Chris. He's noting he was the first one on this morning, so I think we've got at least 3 people on now. I say that jokingly because fortunately, Chris, we have a few more. Good morning to Ian. Lovely to have you on and joining us. Thank you very much. I've got Rosie here, also one of our regulars from a freezing Taupo. Look, Taupo, though, is just lovely. Rachel and I were down there, was it 2 weekends ago? We stayed there for the weekend, enjoyed the little light festival that they had there, and I don't know what you call the park near those restaurants and shops. It was really fantastic. Good morning to Amanda as well. Lovely to have you on board. Look, there's a lot of topics to cover this morning. I thought I'd try to bookend this with something positive and end with something positive, because often, as you guys know, there's a lot of things to talk about that are problematic. Obviously, we've got what's happening at the Olympics in Paris. I think last week we talked about that god-awful opening that the Parisians thought was a good idea. Now we've got the controversy around these boxers who are genetically male but have lived as females all their life. It's actually quite complex, but we can touch on that. We've got the riots in the UK, which in themselves are terrible, but as you might expect, there's lots of politics in play. And then here in New Zealand, we've got, I think, some good news around changes in the math curriculum. This is good for our kids, so I'll touch on that. Some bad news about what our police are up to. And then if we've got time, well, we will have time, because I'll make it, just to give you a bit of a heads up on a review into euthanasia. The push is on by the ACT Party and others, I'm sad to report, although it won't surprise you. They want to extend euthanasia to increase how many people can access it. Good morning, Mike. Lovely to have you on board. So look, I said I was going to start with something positive, so I'm just finding that here on my little deck. And speaking of the Olympics, I thought this was quite lovely. So this isn't, and I'm biased on this because I'm also a fencer. It's one of my sports, well, used to be. Better quickly say that so you understand. Used to be. I don't think you find me doing it anymore. Anyway, long and short, she won. I think she won. But long and short, she was fencing pregnant, and she was very keen to stress that she wasn't just fencing for herself, but fencing for 2 with her little Olympian, as she put it. So I just thought that was lovely. Now, I have forgotten, I must admit, of whether she won or not, but that's actually irrelevant. I just think it's quite lovely and a real testament to life that she's not only able to compete at the highest levels of sport, but at the same time is able to, well, make something of it. It's quite a contrast to a lot of the other stuff we're getting at the moment. Maybe I will jump straight into that. This is the other story that we're dealing with at the moment. This is, of course, the Olympians. Well, this was from, the lady in blue is from Italy, and the woman in red is from Algeria. So it's the one in Algeria that we're focusing on. It's becoming a. Sorry, I've got a smart. Am I allowed to say that? Well, I'm in control of the show. It's a smart ass comment from my colleague Bob McCroskey there. Very good, very good. Now you've thrown me. So look, long and short, people. There's a lot of controversy around the Algerian, in particular, and a person from Taiwan, who is part of the women's boxing. It's got all very confused because the question is how have they worked out whether the Algerian is a woman or not, what is and is not happening. There's various rules from a boxing federation which is aligned with Russia, so that goes down badly. You've got the Olympic Committee, which seems a little bit woke, and then all around it you have particularly trans activists who are very keen to try and conflate trans and gender issues with what we generally know as intersex, or the disordered sex development, DSD. So that's disordered sex development, which is what appears most likely to be happening here. But as I say, you see this in a lot of mainstream media and others who are trying, as I say, to turn this into a gender and sexuality issue and conflate their issues. So that's like men who believe they're women with this particular situation. So first and foremost, we've got to approach this with, I think, a lot of empathy. It's pretty clear that the Algerian, and I don't have a picture of the Taiwanese character, both, well, it's what they call intersex, as I say, but or in the wider scheme of things, it's the disordered sexual development. So for all intents and purposes, they have, if you will, a mixture of male-female organs. Look, it's always a bit hard early in the morning, isn't it? Or can be for some, but the real important thing to notice here, they were born the way they were. This is not a belief issue. That's one really important message I think I need to get across to people is beware falling into the trap that some in mainstream media and certainly a lot of trans activists want you to, which is to think that this is just a belief dynamic in play and therefore should be respected. They were born this way. But being born this way comes with complications. And the long and the short, when they went through puberty, because they have XY chromosomes, so genetically male, I said physically in some ways manifest quite feminine. We know from their own reporting that they've grown up as women, they understand themselves to be women and so forth. But we do know that is at puberty, the male chromosomes, if you will, kick in, and the male development, the male pubescent dynamics begin, and so you end up with a massive physical advantage. Now, arguments can be made, as I think rightly, that for things like athletics and so forth, well, that's just an advantage. It is what it is. But when you get into contact sports like boxing, this raises a whole lot of safety issues, because ultimately the person in red is much, much stronger than the person in blue. So it's a major problem. It's a major problem. For the sporting codes, there's a big issue, as a number of people have raised, of why the two boxers in question are not actually discussing this further or prepared to undergo tests. Ultimately, it's not about them. Paradoxically, it's actually about the safety of other women, and it's about the integrity of the sport. Because as I said on Straight Talk last night, so this is a panel discussion which Family First hosts live every Monday night. At the end of the day, we have a women's category in sports for a very deliberate reason. It's not done to make people happy. It's not done to seem right and proper. It's done because we know there is a substantial difference between men and women when it comes to competition. So, yeah, we've got, a complex issue ultimately. But as I say, one, don't let it get caught up in this wider trans sexuality gender debate. Two, we approach this with enormous respect. And three, we just stick to the basic and core science, which is important. All right, jumping back to New Zealand on a positive front, because we could spend all day talking about the Olympics. and not even the sports side of things. You might have noticed some announcements over the weekend, and this ultimately applies to our children or your children. Mine, being stepchildren, are now 20 and older, so it doesn't quite apply. But the government is pushing forward and faster a math curriculum. So a couple of things to note here, and I hope you can read what's on the screen. First and foremost, the data is very clear, and you know it yourselves. Look, my wife's a teacher. I said stepkids in my case. I've dealt with my former political career with lots of families. Our maths, we're failing our children. The system's failing our children. Going to be political. I'm going to make it really clear the teacher unions are failing our children. This was evident because as soon as this was announced, the unions are out saying it's not necessary. They just need to pay the teachers more, etc., etc. Classic protectionist racket, because actually we also know from research that a lot of the teachers actually can't do the maths themselves. So you end up with a situation of the blind leading the blind. So as it says here, less than a quarter of Year 8 students were above the curriculum. I mean, that's 78%. There we go, there's my math. 78% of New Zealand children aren't even getting the basic mathematics. I mean, that in itself is appalling and scandalous. And so the government's pushed things forward. And look, this is important. So by forward, they're bringing in a curriculum based, if I've read correctly, more off the Singaporean and Australian models, which makes a lot of sense. Singapore is a world leader. Australia obviously is slightly more aligned with us, which is really, really important. Also important is it's going to be what they call a rich curriculum. At the moment, New Zealand's curriculum is waffly. Actually, that's not fair. That's not fair. It's incredibly light. New Zealand curriculum is just generally, here's what the kids sort of need to achieve by a certain year level, and then they leave a lot of the heavy lifting to the teachers. So there's no textbooks, there's no resources really. The teacher is expected to go out and source their own, resources for each child. Now it's lovely on paper, but those poor teachers, when you see the gap in teaching, when you hear teachers talking about how stressed they are or wanting a reduction in administration, so much of this is ultimately down to a curriculum that's not rich. A curriculum that says a child needs to know by X year Pythagoras' theorem. There we go, there's to traumatize everyone as we remember Pythagoras' theorem. But how you teach that's up to each individual teacher, and you're not strictly meant to use textbooks. So you can see how it just creates a massive, massive workload. So we have that in play. So good that it's happening. They're going to speed things up. As you can see as well, only 12% of our Māori students and 8% of high equity, so these are children with challenges, pass. 12% of our Māori students. I mean, that is a shocker of the highest order. And I really emphasize that because you'll hear from the teacher unions and others. Excuse me. Time for a cup of coffee. Which, as you know, is the other pun in relation to into this group solid ground. So why we stress that is they're always the first to talk about the Treaty of Waitangi and equity and how we have to help. Well, we can help by not actually obfuscating or getting in the way of this government implementing a decent and proper math curriculum. The other side is that they're going to, the government that is going to change the way that the Education Review Office, or ERO, works. At the ERO comes in and again looks at piles of paperwork, how many assembly, I'm making this up, but all the administrative side of things, rather than focusing what's the achievement levels. And if I heard the Prime Minister and Minister of Education correctly yesterday, they're going to reform ERO so that it actually focuses on academic achievement. So yeah, I think that's important. So I've just seen something come up about maths. So yeah, I mean, it is hard to argue against it, you'd think, but as you know, Brendan and Christine, you'll know reading the papers, the unions and the left are already railing against it and saying it's not necessary, we just need more time and resources. Well, I'm afraid this has been ongoing for years. And I, for one, am sick and tired of the excuses from teacher unions, amongst others, because by and large they just protect bad teaching, bad teachers, and it's our children collectively that suffer. Now, there was another story. What was that? Maths? Oh, yes. No, I've missed that one. Where did I put it? I'm just trying to see if I can find it. I just need to load it for you. It was just another story, actually. It's to do with this ongoing controversy around... where's it gone? Here we go, guys. Just got to load it into my little system here. It's another ongoing issue, this time to do with what you might be hearing something about Section 7AA of Oranga Tamariki. And that's to do, at the moment, a piece of legislation which says that. Sorry, I should switch it there so you get some context with my face on it. It says that when we are taking children out of high-risk situations and families, at the moment, one has to take, the law says that culture, particularly Maori culture, has to be preferenced, and the government's taking that out. So the current supporters of legislation say that a child's connection to their culture, whakapapa and so forth, is vitally important, and the child, where possible, should stay within the family or the whānau. People like myself, I have to admit, so they're laying my cards on the table, say that actually that particular section is not needed, that the best interest of the child should be put first, not the interest of a culture. Of course, if you're putting the first and best interest of the child first, you will look at what family connections are available. You do want the child to remain connected to their culture where you can. But unfortunately, we all know... Sorry, my wrist is vibrating here as different messages. This has nothing to do with solid ground this morning. It's that classic time, it's 8 something in the morning and everyone's waking up. But people like myself say that actually you don't need a specific reference to prioritise culture over the child. So the context is that this is Tracy Martin. She's a former New Zealand First MP. And now with one of the, I think, government agencies or the like. But she was, well, I think she just wrongly says here, and fungi is basically, I've said that wrong, my pronunciation's terrible this morning, is that wider family relationships, that it's not unusual that a child from one family is raised and looked after by another. And she's right, that's absolutely lovely. But she's playing a little bit of the race card here, that the idea that this happened before Europeans arrived, the connection, she says, with birth parents and families are not curtailed in the same way that European experience suggests. And she says that by having handed this child over back into the whānau, the child was safe. Well, there's a whole series of problems with that. First and foremost, the key reason we take these children away from the families is because they are dysfunctional and they're dangerous. Okay, let's be really clear. Simply because they are iwi or hapu doesn't make them safer. Okay, we are taking these children away from families, be it European, Māori, Pacifica, Indian, Somalian. We take them away from families because they are dangerous. And we also know, more often than not, but not in every case, there is multi-generational dysfunction. Okay? Having dealt with families, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I've dealt with families, the parents who have the child taken off them, they in turn have parents which are dysfunctional, and they in turn grandparents which are dysfunctional. It's often, not always, often multi-generational. So the idea that somehow sending the child back into that family but not the birth parents is going to make things better is nuts. And so for Tracy, and I like Tracy as a person, but to suggest that doing so gives confidence the child is safe is naive. Unfortunately, totally naive. Now again, this is for the agency like Oranga Tamariki to work out. If the wider family is safe, then that's great. If the grandparents can raise the child, if an aunt or uncle can raise the child, that is wonderful. It really is. And of course we should pursue that. But that's not in every case. And I just completely and utterly reject the assertion by those trying to protect, and you get it from the Māori Party and others, that somehow keeping them within their culture will keep them safe, seems to have ignored the fact that the culture didn't keep the kids safe in the first place. We should probably bear that in mind. The child should be at the centre. And the other thing I quickly reject is again this racial play that somehow these fungi relationships are known effectively by Europeans. I mean, that's just absolute and total BS. Look, I come from an Irish stock. It's not unusual that children were spread through family. I mean, look, there's nothing unique is what I'm trying to say. There's just about all and every culture will see family members from time to time looking after another's child. It's nothing unusual. This false dichotomy that somehow the way things were done in New Zealand before the Europeans is unique is basically wrong. And again, concepts, I remember arguing with a minister of my own party years ago that was saying that, in this case, it was saying that, Māori communities put the child at the centre. And I was arguing against that because it was like every culture does. Every culture puts the children at the centre. Doesn't matter if you're Russian, South African, French, Colombian, Irish, Māori, Samoan, every culture puts the child at the centre. Okay, every culture has mechanisms where the child born in one family can be raised and supported by another, and we have to stop. These false dichotomies, these false splits. It actually, to me, it is incredibly frustrating. Christina ran another good comment here. Sorry, as things scroll past me. It is highly emotional, absolutely. I mean, you've seen tears and anger and frustrations, but ultimately, for some it is about money, I'm afraid to say. But, look, Rachel and I do foster care, and there's just some amazing children out there. And they just need to be loved, actually. They need to be loved, and where we can support them in their culture, making sure they have their connections to family, absolutely. And then I've just noticed this comment, this jumps back to the topic on maths. I can't read the whole thing, unfortunately, in front of me, but I assume Chris is saying this has been ongoing. Yeah, and look, I think that's probably, if that's what Chris is saying, an important point. This math issue is not simply a Labour government problem for last time. I really want to be clear on that, just in case anyone takes that away. Sorry, I seem to be losing my voice this morning. So I need to drink more coffee. This has been an ongoing issue across multiple governments, and there's a risk in what's happening at the moment that another government comes in, this time National, and it changes the curriculum, and then Labour comes in 3 or 6 years' time, and they change the curriculum, and then it's very painful. Hey, look, another New Zealand issue is this little puppy. I've actually written a Substack on it, so if you don't follow my Substack, go on to On Point. That's at substack.com. Look it up. Look up Simon O'Connor and On Point. Long and short, New Zealand police have decided that they should be logging and cataloguing hate speech in New Zealand. And this is a leaked copy of their training. By the way, of course, people, you're going, police are logging hate speech? Do we even have a hate speech law? Good that you asked. No, we do not have any hate speech laws in New Zealand. We have very high thresholds, of course, if you start threatening people, threatening violence. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But what we're talking here is the hate speech which the left, progressives, the woke, whatever you want to call them, are desirous of, which is basically you say anything that hurts their feelings, you should go to prison. So we have no law in New Zealand. But the police, bless them, have decided that they can now just basically make up laws, which is in effect what they've done. They've just decided there should be some hate speech legislation and that they should go around policing it. So they've started training police officers in hate speech. They want you to recognise it and record it. And here's just a couple of examples of what they deem to be hate speach. So talking about free speech could be perceived as hate speech. Yes, you heard that right. And you can see from their training document here, as I say, it was leaked to the Free Speech Union, which is how I've got hold of it, suggesting that there's only 2 genders or 2 sexes could be hate speech. So Mr. Police Officer and Mrs. Police Officer can be going around now, and if someone chooses to report you because you've decided, like the rest of humanity and history, that there's only 2 sexes in the world, then you could be up for hate speech. if you say that actually freedom of speech is important, that you think the likes of Twitter and Facebook shouldn't be over-regulated by governments, that could be hate speech. If you say that actually I don't believe the Treaty of Waitangi in the way that the Maori Party use it these days, that could be hate speech. And you'll be recorded by police in their little hate hub, you heard that right, hate hub database. So it's an absolute outrageous shocker by police. As I say, the Free Speech Union is starting a campaign against this. I've written my Substack. If you'd like to get a bit more detail, head over there and read it. But it's beyond outrageous, not simply because it's the hate speech side of things, which is police siding with woke activists in the same way they did at Albert Park and at other protests by these lunatics. But it's not for police to make laws. Parliament makes laws. So poor old Rosie here now could strictly be up. So yes, it could be up for hate speech because, by the way, you won't be, we hope. But the police could log this, you'd never know. This is the absolute outrageous shock. As I say, it's not for police to be involved with. And then speaking of police, this is jumping internationally. Look, we've got a terrible situation developing and continuing in the UK. This is what happens when you get various approaches to policing and you don't allow people to have free speech. So really, sadly, it needs to be condemned. You have a lot of soccer hooligans and, yep, you would say far right nationalists are rioting, attacking mosques, and so forth. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are very, very quick to call it out as thuggery and so forth. What is interesting, of course, is that when there was a riot by migrants, Muslims and Islamists in Leeds 2 weeks ago, you heard pretty much nothing about that. You have the ongoing pro-Hamas protests in the likes of London and elsewhere where they attack buildings, deface monuments, harass people, harass Jews. You hear nothing. In the UK case, again, it's in the UK, but we have symmetries here. They've created a big fund immediately to support mosques, which is good because these are violent, idiotic thugs. But as I say, where was the money for the synagogues over the last few months when Islamist groups and far left groups have been harassing and attacking said synagogues? So you can see where I'm going with this. It's that hypocritical approach to things, which in no way justifies the violence at the moment. It's abhorrent. It should not be happening. But you see two sets of approaches. The other thing I'll just say, and I follow politics, I follow UK politics, all of this is a consequence of not allowing people to actually have conversations. Which is, people are concerned in the UK, as they are in Europe, with masses of migration. They are concerned about the rising violence on the street. So in the UK, you are having people stabbed, you're having soldiers stabbed, police stabbed, you're having bombings, you're having quite regular Islamist violence now. You're not meant to talk about these things. And so frustrations build. Now again, that does not justify any of this. Okay, to these thugs who are attacking hotels, who are harassing asylum seekers, who are attacking mosques, it does not, it's just not appropriate. Completely not appropriate. And I think the full weight of the law, as the UK is doing, needs to be thrown at them. But it is interesting, as I say, week after week, you have the pro-Hamas protests, damage, abuse of Jews, and what's happening there? Very little. Hey, last thing to draw your attention to is this little thing. So, as you may know, 3 years ago, the Parliament sadly said assisting someone's suicide and euthanasia is okay. They had to put some relatively, it's not even tight guidelines actually. New Zealand's law is so weak it's not funny. People say, oh, well, we've not seen any problems, which I also find darkly funny because, of course, anyone who is the problem is dead. It's one of the inverted commas beauties of the euthanasia system, that you never really know what the person thought after you've killed them. But at the moment, there's a big push by the likes of the ACT Party to expand, the criteria. So at the moment, you have to be terminally ill and for 6 months to live, which, by the way, guys, when someone says you've got 6 months to live, that's not a scientific statement. It's more of it's more of an art form in a sense. Like, it's not literally 6 months. It just says that's a pretty serious disease. But as you can imagine, there's a push to extend that, not just terminal illnesses, but other wider illnesses, that if people are just in, even mental illness, or some are saying, look, if you're just tired of life, you should be allowed to go. There's a push to remove conscience rights, so the doctors cannot object. Good question. Debbie's asking why it's linked to soccer. It's not football in and of itself, but unfortunately the UK has quite a hooligan side of some football fans. I mean, we're being to be really, really, really clear here, including because I know Bob's a great fan, and as of other of my colleagues at Family First. It's not football fans in general, but unfortunately there's a lunatic, but a hooligan fringe that exists within the UK as well. So long and short, there's a review of the current Euthanasia Act. There are a lot of people who will tell you it's working fine. There isn't actually evidence to support that. Better be clear. It's not like tons of evidence saying it's going terribly, other than hundreds of people are dead. But I want to encourage you, look up the Ministry of Health website and find this public consultation. There's about 10 or so fairly easy questions to answer. We at Family First will be putting some resources together for you soon. But go and submit. Particularly point out we don't get much reporting at the moment. There seems to be a deliberate desire to hide, hide what is happening. We know that the review committees aren't fully staffed, and we know that they're trying to do this consultation on the lowdown, which is one of the reasons I'm letting you know about it. So look it up, and certainly can I encourage you, push against anyone trying to take away the conscience rights of doctors and nurses. If they don't want to be part of killing people, they shouldn't have to be. And I would suggest push against expanding the criteria, because that's going to capture our disability sector and others and put them at terrible, terrible risk. Final thing I thought I would quickly add, because I just thought it was another lovely story. This is from a couple of weeks ago. Again, you can look it up. I think this was on the Herald. But he has been looked after by his wife for year after year after year. And I just thought, as a contrast, could we call it that? Excuse me, to euthanasia. Here is just a remarkable... By the way, euthanasia advocates would like it extended to be able to include someone like this man, which I think is shocking. Instead, we have a good example here of someone just being loved and cared for, and I just think it's a lovely story. Guys, always a pleasure to have you with me. I don't know where the half an hour goes. I'm always over time. I'm just going to let you know about a few other things which are happening. As you say, every Monday night, Family First host, or Bob McCoskrie, hosts Straight Talk. It's a panel. We had Bruce Logan, Ala Pomelele, Peter Williams, yes, the Peter Williams, and myself on last Monday or last night, so it's 8 p.m. live. Most days Bob does his Mick blog. You can get it on podcast. You can see it on Good morning, Melanie. Sorry, I can just see a comment passing here. Good morning. So he does that most days on the topics of the day. My colleague Tumby does Pulse Point. It's a weekly show where she basically digests 5 or so of the big stories of the week, particularly from a conservative lens, lets you know about things which are happening. And we've introduced a new show. This is called Political Playback. It's every Thursday at 5 o'clock. Again, live. These, like you are doing at the moment, you can comment, and Bob and I, who are the hosts of the show, will take your comments. We basically look over the politics of the last week and have a chat about it. I also continue to do a podcast, Family Matters, for Family First every week. That's primarily found on YouTube. So more recently had Christians Against Poverty. I've had Professor Theo Boer on. He's a euthanasia expert from the Netherlands. I've had Vainant from Family Life. We just have an array of people and topics. And as I was saying, I do a Substack. Where is one? Here's one from the past. I do a Substack. It's called On Point. This is one of my older ones. This was around the assassination, of course, assassination attempt better be clear on that. It was only an attempt. Better not suggest that it happened, should we? But anyway, on point, you can read that up. I don't have an image, but Bob McCoskrie is now on Substack as well. So look up Mick Blog or look up Bob McCoskrie on Substack and you'll find him. And as you know, I also do a radio show every week on Friday morning, live from 10 a.m. on Reality Check Radio. You can hear that online or download the app. I'd really encourage you to listen to this interview. It's said Päivi Räsänen. She is a member of Parliament in Finland, former minister, who's been arrested and charged because she quoted the Bible. I'm not making any of that up. She's been arrested and charged for quoting the Bible. She's a member of Parliament. She's a former minister. She's a medical doctor. She is remarkable. I just really encourage you to track down that interview. I'll see if I can put the link. I'll try to remember to put the link into the comments. But guys, lovely to have you on this morning. Thank you for all the questions. I'll try after this to jump on and look at the comments across the different platforms and say hello. But in the meantime, you have a wonderful, wonderful day. It's always a pleasure to join you and really appreciate your support of myself, Bob, Family First, and the entire crew.